OK. Mesdames et messieurs, bienvenue à notre séance conjointe aujourd'hui entre l'Institut Kurde de Paris et l'Institut Kurde de Washington. L'Institut Kurde de Paris a été fondé en 1983. L'Institut est dirigé par son président, le Dr Kendal Neza. L'Institut Kurde de Paris a pour but la sensibilisation du public aux matières kurdes. Et c'est la même chose pour l'Institut Kurde de Washington, fondé en 1996 par le malheureusement défunt Dr Najmuddin Karim. Notre séance aujourd'hui sera en anglais, je m'excuse. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for coming today to our joint session of the Washington Kurdish Institute and the Kurdish Institute of Paris, the Institut Kurde de Paris. The Kurdish Institute in Paris was founded in 1983. Its director is Dr. Kendal Neza, and its purpose is to raise awareness about Kurdish issues. That's the same purpose of the Washington Kurdish Institute, which was founded in 1996 by the unfortunately late Dr. Najmuddin Karim. My name is Andrew Apostolou. I'm an expert on Iran, and I've been asked by the director of the Washington Kurdish Institute, Yusuf Ismail, to chair today's panels. The first panel, I'm pleased to say, will be a question and answer session with Elham Ahmad. Elham Ahmad is, I'm sure, known to all of you. She is the president of the executive committee of the Syrian Democratic Council, a longtime activist for Kurdish rights in Syria. She has worked closely with the United States and other countries as part of the struggle against ISIS, and is now involved in the administration of the northeast of Syria, also known in Kurdish as Rojava. As I said, this part of the session will be a question and answer period. So I'm going to let the first question go to Yusuf. In terms of languages, you can ask in any language you want and we'll translate. Ahmed El-Hendi is going to be translating for Elham Ahmad. Thank you, Ahmed, for joining. But Yusuf will go first, and then if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. There's a little icon on the bottom of your screen. You just tap it and we'll know to let you ask. Thank you, Elham, for joining us. Yusuf, please go ahead with your first question. I think maybe Yusuf, if you can't, can you answer? Okay, we'll move to the next question. Vladimir van Wildenberg, who's a journalist based in Kurdistan, and I believe soon to get married, Vladimir, so congratulations, has a question, and it is the following. Erdogan recently said he's open to make relations with the Syrian government. What is the risk if this happens for the Syrian Kurds? And also, Vladimir has a second question, is why do you think the Syrian government, Elham, has not made any comment about the death of over 20 Syrian soldiers during recent Turkish attacks? Elham, over to you. If that's not clear, please ask me.
Okay. شكرا للمعهدين الكرديين بباريس وواشنطن بخصوص إعادة العلاقة بين النظام والنظام السوري وتركيا. نحن ننظر إلى هذه العلاقة بعين الشك، ونرى بأن النظام أردوغان يمارس ضغوطات يستفز بها الأطراف الدولية، ويسعى بالضغط من خلال التصريح بشكل مستمر على إعادة العلاقة مع النظام السوري، خاصة وأن يعني كلا النظامين لديهم قضية أساسية وهي القضية الكردية. لم ترى الحل حتى الآن، وكلا النظامين يمارسان سياسات مشتركة بما يخص القضية الكردية. بالتالي إعادة العلاقة ضمن هذا الإطار نراه خطراً ليس على الشعب الكردي فقط، إنما نراه خطراً بالنسبة للشعب السوري بأكمله، باعتبار أن النظام التركي أو أردوغان كان يدعم الفصائل السورية المسلحة، لكنه خطوة خطوة سلمها بالكامل للنظام السوري. بالتالي هناك مخاطر من إعادة التقارب بين النظامين، خاصة في ظل انعدام الحل السياسي على المستوى السوري بأكمله.
خليني ترجم. First I would like to thank the Washington Kurdish Institute and the Institut of Paris for organizing this event. We are very skeptical about the rapprochement between the Syrian government and the Turkish government. However, we think that Erdogan is using this in order to pressure European and Western governments to say that they are trying to normalize the relation with the regime in Damascus. I think this if normalization of relation between the two regimes happened, that would be risky not only for the Syrian Kurds but also for the whole people in the region. The two regimes, they have not yet reached a solution for the Kurdish issue. In Turkey there is a Kurdish issue, in Syria there is a Kurdish issue. So we think that this would bear risks to the whole region and to the whole Kurdish population.
يعني تاريخيا أيضا كلما كانت يعني عندما كانت العلاقة جيدة بين الطرفين أيضا كانوا الكرد ضحايا لهذا التقارب. بالتالي بالتأكيد هناك مخاطر جادة على حياة الكرد وعلى حياة السوريين بشكل عام. أما عن موقف النظام من الهجمات التركية، خاصة في ظل فقدان عدد من الجنود حياتهم في القصف التركي، ننظر إليه أيضا بأن النظام لا يهتم بجنوده ومقاتليه والناس الذين يخدمونه حتى الآن، إن فقدوا حياتهم في معارك معينة، لكن هذا بالتأكيد يعني النظام مهتم فقط بسلطته وبتواصله في هذا الاتجاه، وهو لا يريد أن يبدي أي موقف تجاه الهجمات التركية، خاصة بأنها موجهة لمناطق شمال وشرق سوريا.
Also always when these regimes, the Turkish and the Syrian regime, were close to each other, the Kurds were victims to this relation. For your other part, the other question, the Syrian regime doesn't really care about its soldiers, about its fighters, and those who serve the regime. The regime is clinging to power, is only interested in its authority and its power. And of course, they doesn't want to give any position in regard to the Turkish aggression, because this aggression is towarded against us, against the Kurd.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. We now have a question that was sent, thank you, from Bakir Lashkari. And his question is, independence of any part of Kurdistan is meaningless unless the international community accepts it. How do you organize a diplomatic battle to secure the support of this dream of the Kurds and Kurdistan? Bakir, thank you for the question.
يعني العمل على يعني المشروع الذي نعمل عليه هو تحصيل حقوق الشعب الكردي أينما تواجد. فباعتبار أن كردستان مقسمة بين 4 دول، بالتالي من الضروري أن يتم حل قضية الشعب الكردي ضمن إطار الحدود الدول المرسومة. فالكرد في سوريا لابد أن يحصلوا على حقوقهم ضمن إطار سوريا اتحادية، سوريا ديمقراطية لكل السوريين. بالتالي الاعتراف بالهوية الكردية في إطار الدولة السورية وضمن إطار نظام لا مركزي. أيضا في الدول الأخرى، هناك في العراق إقليم كردستان، وفي تركيا ممكن أن يتم حل القضية الكردية ضمن إطار حدود الدولة التركية، ضمن إطار أقاليم تخص المشتركات الجغرافية الثقافية للشعوب في هذه المناطق، وإيران نفس كذلك الأمر. فضمن هذا الإطار ممكن أن يتم حل القضية الكردية ضمن إطار أنظمة فيدرالية، أنظمة اتحادية تعترف بالهويات المتنوعة في تلك الدول.
Now our project is working on achieving the Kurdish rights in all the countries that divided Kurdistan. Now the Kurds lives in 4 states, and we seek the solution within the boundary and the border of these states. In Syria, we look for a federal state for everyone, and that the Kurdish identity would be acknowledged. We believe in decentralization. In Iraq now, we have the Kurdistan region, and Turkey as well. There should be a solution within the Turkish border where we would be having regions that have people from the same similar cultural and ethnic backgrounds. In Iran, also same solution could be achieved. So we look for a decentralized state, for a federal states that could be a solution for all the Kurds.
Thank you very much indeed. We've got now a question from Dominic Brunaccioni, who was a former research assistant at the Washington Kurdish Institute. And he says, first of all, to say to you, Elham, thank you for all your hard work. His question is to do with the massive advantage that Turkey now has over NATO, and NATO incoming members like Sweden and Finland, who seem more interested in supportive of actually sending Kurds back to Turkey. So how is the SDF, Dominic asks, combating Turkey's harsher swinging of its stick in NATO and the West at large? And can it combat the level of influence that Turkey is pinning against these NATO-willing nations that were former safe havens of the Kurds? That's to say, places like Sweden and Finland. Thank you for the question, Dominic.
يعني بالتأكيد هذا موضوع مهم جدا، خاصة أن يعني لقوات سوريا الديمقراطية شراكة قوية مع دول التحالف في محاربة الإرهاب. أيضا كان لها دور رئيسي في القضاء على دولة الخلافة. بالتالي الاستمرار بهذه الشراكة أيضا مهم جدا، لأن لمجرد الإعلان عن القضاء على دولة الخلافة لا يعني إنهاء الإرهاب بشكل كامل والتخلص من موضوع الفكر التطرفي في المنطقة. بالعكس، لا زال هذا مستمر، ولا زالت محاولات داعش بإعادة إنشاء نفسه مرة أخرى، ولا زال هناك تهديد في المخيم، في السجون. بالتالي يعني موضوع أخذ الموضوع على أساس الاختيار ما بين قوات سوريا الديمقراطية وتركيا التي هي تعتبر عضو ناتو مهم في الناتو، أرى بأنه ليس من الضرورة أن يتم الاختيار بين الطرفين، إنما قوات سوريا الديمقراطية لها دور مهم. إضافة إلى أن باعتبار أن تركيا هي دولة ناتو، فيجب أن يتم منعها بشكل كامل بمحاولاتها القضاء على قوات سوريا الديمقراطية، باعتبار أن قوات سوريا الديمقراطية أيضا هي شريكة لقوات التحالف ولها دور أساسي ومهم. لذلك من الضروري منع تركيا وإنهاء سياساتها العدائية تجاه قوات سوريا الديمقراطية.
Okay, this is an important question. The SDF has a coalition partnership with a coalition in fighting the ISIS, and was able to abolish the Islamic Caliphate. The sustainability of this relation is very important, and also the fact that we declared the defeat of ISIS, that doesn't mean that ISIS has been ended. ISIS is still trying to re-emerge. And now they are already there in the camp and the detention centers. And the West should not have a choice between SDF and Turkey. Turkey is an important NATO country, and it's not important for the West to choose between us and Turkey. SDF can still have an important role in fighting ISIS and fighting terrorism, and the West can play a role in stopping the Turkish aggression against the SDF and our territories.
وأعتقد بأن يعني تركيا أيضا مهتمة لأن تبقى عضوة بالناتو، وإن كان هذا ضروريا بالنسبة لها. أعتقد بأنه يجب على الناتو أيضا أن يعلمها أو يعني يتم الإعلان على أن توسعة الناتو يجب أن لا يكون على حساب شركاء آخرين، خاصة كقوات سوريا الديمقراطية والإدارة الذاتية التي لا تزال تدير ملف مهم جدا في موضوع السجون والمخيمات التي تحوي الإرهابيين.
And as also we have to add that Turkey is really want to be in NATO, and in order for Turkey to be in NATO, the West should tell them that, I mean, expanding the NATO shouldn't happen on the account of other allies, other partners like the SDF, like the Autonomous Administration, who is dealing now with a very important or managing a very important matter, which is the detention centers and the camps. So the choice shouldn't be between us and Turkey.
Thank you very much indeed. We've got quite a few questions coming in. I just want to quickly say that I recognize participating in this event today is the president of the Washington Kurdish Institute, Sirwan Najmuddin Karim, the son of the late Dr. Karim. I'm sorry we're not in an actual meeting, so I only saw the name, I didn't see the face. I'd like next to give the opportunity to Ambryn Zaman, formerly economist correspondent in Turkey, well-known journalist covering the region. Ambryn is going to actually ask in person, or as close to in person as you can get virtually, and our amazing technical team will enable that now. Thank you. Ambryn.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, it's wonderful to see Elham. It's wonderful, really. So my question is the following. Do you detect a difference in the reaction from your Western partners, chiefly the United States, and also the European Union, to Turkey's most recent wave of attacks on Rojava compared to that in 2019, when Turkey conducted Operation Peace Spring, and there really was a very robust reaction and sanctions? If so, how would you describe that difference, and to what do you attribute it? Are you confident in the support of the United States and its commitment to pursuing its partnership with you militarily and diplomatically? What assurances has the United States offered to you? And has there been any sort of mediation between the US and Turkey on your behalf, or between Russia and Turkey on your behalf? Are there any concrete demands made by Turkey that were relayed to you by either power in exchange for not conducting a ground offensive? Is Iran the other main stakeholder involved in any of those talks? And how would you assess the stance of the Kurdistan regional government in all of this? Thank you very much, Elham.
يعني بخصوص ردة الفعل الغربية في بدايات الهجوم، رأينا كان هناك صمت دولي بخصوص الهجمة التركية، لكن بعد عدة أيام يعني ظهرت ردود الفعل، وحتى الآن نرى بأن ردود الفعل ليست بالمستوى المقبول أو مقارنة بالهجمة السابقة تختلف نوعا ما. وأعتقد بأن تركيا تستغل موضوع الحرب الأوكرانية وتريد من خلال الانشغال الدولي بالملف الأوكراني أن تنتهز الفرصة لتقوم بحملتها وتكسب الصمت الدولي في هجمتها علينا في هذه الفترة. واليوم أيضا رأينا كان له تصريح أردوغان حول أنه حصل على الموافقة من بوتين للقيام بحملة برية على المنطقة. لم نتأكد من ذلك بعد، لكن كان هناك تصريح في هذا الخصوص، وأعتقد أن كل هذه التصريحات لا تزال ضمن إطار ممارسة الضغوطات على الأطراف الدولية لكسب الصمت الدولي مرة أخرى للقيام بحملتها البرية على مناطقنا.
So the reaction at the beginning, we saw a bit of silence, and then a few days after, we started to see more reaction against the Turkish attack. But up until now, it's not like the previous years. And I believe that Turkey is using the war in Ukraine and exploiting it, that the world is busy in order to exploit this and attack us. Erdogan just stated today that he got the approval from Putin. We are not yet sure about that. However, I also still see this as a way of pressure that Erdogan is mounting on the Western countries in order to get approval to start a military invasion against our territories.
وتركيا تبتز الدول بموضوع توسعة الناتو أيضا بخصوص عضوية فنلندا والسويد بالناتو. تبتز الدول في هذا الموضوع أيضا. بخصوص الثقة بالولايات المتحدة، يعني حتى الآن يعني رأينا هناك كان في ضغط أمريكي على السلطات التركية بإيقاف الهجمة التركية، لكن من الآن فصاعدا أيضا نرى هناك حاجة لوضع آليات واضحة أكثر لمنع الهجمة التركية على مناطقنا بريا، سواء كان بريا أو عن طريق الجو. يعني هذه الآلية لا تزال غير واضحة ومبهمة، لذلك نحن نضغط في هذا الخصوص ونتواصل مع العديد من الأطراف الدولية لوضع آلية لمنع تركيا من الاستمرار بهجماتها على هذه المنطقة.
So also we know that Erdogan is blackmailing the NATO because of the membership of Finland and Sweden. As for the US pressure on Turkey, yes, they pressure Turkey, but we need to see a clear mechanism of how can we stop the Turkish aggression, whether it's a land invasion or like air-like strikes. Up until now, there is nothing clear about this mechanism, how Turkey could be stopped. And this is what we are pushing for. And we are reaching out to all of our friends and allies in order to achieve this.
يعني ولدينا علم يعني دول متعددة تمارس الضغوطات على تركيا لمنعها، منها روسيا، منها أمريكا، فرنسا، بريطانيا. هذه الدول لها دور في الضغط على تركيا لعدم القيام بحملتها، لكن بخصوص التوسط والوصول إلى حل أو حوار ما بيننا وبين تركيا، حتى الآن لا يوجد خطوات عملية من قبل الدول بهذا الخصوص.
Okay, so we are aware also that there are a lot of countries, Russia, United States, France, Germany, that they are trying to pressure Turkey not to carry out a military invasion. As for mediation, there is nothing practical so far in order to mediate between us and between Turkey.
وتركيا رافضة لأي شكل من الحوار معنا، سواء كان مجلس سوريا الديمقراطية أو قوات سوريا الديمقراطية، يعني الكيانات الموجودة في المنطقة. هي رافضة لأي شكل من أشكال الحوار، وهي داعية للحرب بشكل مستمر، باعتبار أن تركيا تعتمد على نتائج الحروب خاصة في موضوع الانتخابات وتنفيذ مشروعها التوسعي في المنطقة.
As for dialogue, Turkey is absolutely refusing any sort of negotiation or dialogue, whether with SDC or SDF or any of the entities of the autonomous administration. Turkey refuses all of that, and they always call for war. The current government, they rely on the result of the war or the war achievement in order to use it in domestic consumption for the election.
ودائما نحن نأمل المواقف الإيجابية من على الأقل الجهات القريبة منا، خاصة في إقليم كردستان. لكن بالحقيقة يعني خاصة في هذه الفترة العصيبة رأينا بأن إقليم كردستان أيضا تعرض لهجمات سواء كان من قبل تركيا أو من قبل إيران. يعني من الطرفين تعرضت لهجمات عسكرية، بالتالي هم أيضا وضعهم حرج وهم في خطر، كنا نأمل بأن يكون لهم دور إيجابي في موضوع الهجمات التي حدثت على شمال وشرق سوريا أيضا، لكن التزموا الصمت. يعني هذا كان موقفهم، الالتزام بالصمت ضمن هذا الإطار. لذلك نأمل بأن تتغير الأدوار وتتغير المواقف تجاه الهجمات التركية، سواء كانت تركية أو هجمات إيرانية. وبالنسبة لموقف إيران، يعني تدخلها في هذا الملف، يعني في شمال وشرق سوريا بالتأكيد هم دائما موجودين على طاولة المحادثات، خاصة الثلاثية إيران وروسيا وتركيا، يعني الحلف أو قمة الأستانا. هناك أيضا دائما يتم الحديث عن موضوع شمال وشرق سوريا ووجود قوات التحالف في المنطقة، وهناك دائما مواقف واضحة خاصة من خلال التصريحات التي تصدر في نتيجة كل قمة يتم عقدها، وهو أنهم معادين لأي كيان ممكن أن يتشكل في شمال وشرق سوريا. فضمن هذا الإطار نفهم بأن هم أيضا غير راضون عن الواقع الموجود في شمال وشرق سوريا.
So we always wish for positive statements, especially from parties that are close to us, like the KRG. But this is a very critical time even for the KRG. They have been under attack from both Turkey and Iran. So they are in a also dangerous and a critical situation. We hoped and hope that they carry out a positive role, but they kept silent so far. However, we wish that all the world would be taking a position against any aggression, whether the Iranian aggression or the Turkish aggression against us or against the KRG. As for the Iranian role, Iran is involved in all the trilateral negotiation between Turkey, Russia, Iran, what we call the Astana Summit. And they always speak up against the present of the coalition forces, and also they are pretty much against any sort of region or autonomous region in our area.
Thank you very much. We've got 7 more questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read them out. Although some of these points have already been answered by Elham. Thank you very much, Elham. You've given very full answers. But I'm going to read them out because I think it's important for people to be heard. And what I'm going to do is ask you to answer the ones that you feel have not yet been fully covered. So here's an interesting question. It's actually, I'm going to consolidate.
But give me some time for translation, please, Andrew.
Yeah, why don't you go and try and translate that first?
Okay, please. translate what he said. So هو عنده 7 أسئلة رح يقراهم كلياتهم. في بعض من الأسئلة أنت جاوبتي عليهم، لكن أنت جاوبي على الأسئلة اللي بتشوفي إنه ما جاوبتي عليها أو حابة تجاوبي عليها.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, so we have a question. Actually, Serhat Ozkan and Kirill Vertiayev actually have very similar, interesting question. It's slightly been covered. It's about Russia. So Serhat asks, how do you find Russia's approach to the Kurds in Rojava? What's really their motivation? He reminds us, a very interesting point, that in 2018, Russia had worked with the Kurds in Afrin and then withdrew and let Turkey attack. And since Russia started its invasion of the Ukraine, it's only actually Turkey, he observes, that is helping them. Do you think there could be a Russian green light for a Turkish invasion, again, for their own interests? And Kirill Vertiayev's question is, it's similar. How do you estimate the role of Russia in negotiating and maybe moderating conflict between Turkey and AANES, or the autonomous region, your region, and Damascus? So if you want to add anything more on Russia, go ahead. If you don't feel you have anything more to add, please say so.
يعني روسيا موقفها من القضية الكردية بالأساس أحيانا يظهر من خلال التصريحات أو نتائج الاجتماعات اللي تعقد في أستانا، يعني قمة أستانا. وأعتقد بأنه روسيا أيضا، يعني كما هو معلوم أن روسيا أيضا هي دولة متنوعة الثقافات، ويوجد فيها نظام جمهوريات وأقاليم ودول، يعني بمعنى أنه هي دولة فيدرالية اتحادية. بالتالي ممكن أن تساهم في لعب دور لتحصيل حقوق الشعب الكردي، وكان لهم تصريحات مستمرة، يعني المسؤولين كان لهم تصريحات مستمرة في هذا الخصوص. لكن حتى الآن من خلال الحوارات اللي يعني دور الوساطة اللي هو حاول يلعب دور الوساطة، حتى الآن لم نصل إلى نتيجة، منها أنهم ينظرون إلى القضية الكردية بشكل مجزأ وليس بشكل كامل، بأن الكرد لهم حقوق سياسية، ثقافية، اجتماعية، اقتصادية. لا ينظرون إلى هذا الموضوع من هذا الاتجاه، إنما فقط حقوق ثقافية، ممكن تحصيل حق التعلم باللغة الأم، يعني محصور جدا. يعني هذا المنظور الذي ينظرون به إلى القضية الكردية. بالتالي لا نحصل على نتيجة من خلال الوساطات اللي أحيانا روسيا تقوم بها.
Okay, most of the Russian position, we see it through Astana. So as you all know, also Russia is a multi-ethnic state, and it has many cultures. So they have some sort of a federal system. So we think that Russia probably could play a role in helping the Kurdish people to gain their rights. But up until now, through all the mediation that Turkey carried, we did not get any result. They look at the Kurdish cause in more of through a cultural aspect. They don't look that the Kurdish people need to have their political rights, their economical rights. They see it through only from a cultural perspective, where the Kurds should be learning in their mother language. So this is how the Russians see the Kurdish issue in Syria. And this is why up until now, Russia could not achieve any result from mediating between us and between the government in Damascus.
Thank you very much.
علما لا نزال ننظر إلى روسيا بأنها طرف ضاغط، يعني ممكن أن يكون طرف ضاغط على النظام للوصول إلى حل سياسي في سوريا.
Despite all of that, we still look at Russia as a country that could pressure pretty much the Syrian regime in order to achieve a political solution in Syria.
Thank you. We have a question actually I want to mention this in particular, from Paul Namfi. Thank you, Paul, for this question. Paul is a volunteer with the Emergency Committee for Rojava. One of the founders of that committee, Meredith Tax, very sadly passed away recently. And she was a great activist for Rojava and also a great feminist activist. And his question is, outside of Rojava, how do we, what are our best efforts, to help what's the message we can give to decision makers to pressure Turkey not to invade, given the enormous efforts made by Rojava against ISIS. And I also want to mention, there's a question, sorry, Akil, I'm kind of overloading you here, okay. But I want from Professor Mehmet Gürses, who studies Kurdish issues, and he says, we have all a clear idea about your demands of the Syrian regime. Can you comment on what the Syrian regime is asking of you? Have they made a specific offer? And very quickly, I think I have a question from Ali, who asks in French, what do you think of the future of the Kurdish region in Syria? And are you looking for autonomy or independence? Ali, I apologize if I mistranslated that. Elham, sorry for throwing those quick questions at you. I know your time is limited, but I really wanted these people to be heard, and thank you very much.
يعني السبل اللي ممكن أو النشاطات اللي ممكن القيام بها كنشطاء في خارج البلد، يعني ممكن النظر إلى هذا الموضوع من إطار أن الجالية أينما كانت هي ممكن أن تلعب دور ضاغط على الحكومات، خاصة إذا كان في لهم تواصل مع منظمات، مع مؤسسات حكومية، مع أشخاص من مراكز القرار. ممكن مثلا يعني العمل على الضغط أو إعطاء تصور مستمر حول الواقع الموجود وحول القضية الكردية والعداء التركي، يعني عداء حكومة العدالة والتنمية للقضية الكردية بشكل عام. فإعطاء هذا التصور وعدم إعطاء الحق لتركيا أو عدم شرعنة الهجمات التركية على المنطقة مهم جدا، أنه الدول اللي هي شريكة لتركيا بمنعها من القيام بحملتها، إضافة إلى ممكن القيام بنشاطات احتجاجية في تلك الساحات، خاصة من شخصيات صديقة للشعب الكردي، صديقة للشعب السوري، وبمواجهة لإيقاف الهجمات التركية على شمال وشرق سوريا.
There could be a lot of activities carried by the pro-Rojava, pro-northeastern Syria community in the West. I think they could play a role in pressuring the governments and the decision-maker circles, also to keep raising the awareness about the Kurdish cause, the Syrian cause, and a way that telling the people, the policymakers, that Turkey is hostile to all the Kurdish rights, not only us. Also it could the pressure could happen through like protest movements in all of these capitals where like people could participate in these events. Most important things is to keep the flow of information about the reality, what's going on in our region and the Turkish behavior toward us.
بخصوص طلبات النظام السوري منا، يعني النظام السوري لا زال مصر على الحفاظ على النظام المركزي والحفاظ على السلطة، هذا هو هدفه الأساسي. فإذا هو حتى الآن لا يقبل بأي شكل من أشكال الحوار، هذا يأتي من تعنته وإصراره بالحفاظ على نظامه السلطوي وعدم الاعتراف بأي حراك شعبي ظهر وقد يظهر في المراحل المقبلة في سوريا. بالتالي ينظر إلى موضوع الإدارة الذاتية على أنه مشروع تقسيمي، ويروج لهذه الفكرة بشكل متقصد كي لا يقدم أي تنازل للشعب السوري ولا يحقق الديمقراطية في سوريا. بالتالي يعني مطالبه حقيقة هي لا يوجد مطالب غير أن يتم تسليم المنطقة له ويعود هو كما السابق بالسيطرة على كامل الجغرافيا السورية. هذا هو مطلبه الأساسي.
Okay, so the Syrian regime is still pretty much linked to the idea of central government. Up until now, he lives in denial The Syrian regime wants to keep the status quo like it was before 2011. He would not acknowledge any movement that happened in the past or is going to happen in the future. They promote and send misleading information about us that we are a secessionist movement. And this is why he refuses to talk to us or show any compromises, because he doesn't want to give any compromises to the Syrian people. The Syrian regime won't have really no demands. All what they ask us for, that we should surrender the whole region to the Syrian regime, and that we, like nothing has happened in the area. So he wants to recontrol our territories.
يعني بخصوص موضوع الاستقلال أو الإدارة الذاتية، بالتأكيد يعني نحن مشروعنا مشروع إدارة ذاتية، ولكن يتم الترويج لموضوع الإدارة الذاتية وكأنه مشروع انفصالي. هذا ما تقوم به الدولة التركية وآلاته الإعلامية. أيضا بعض القنوات الإعلامية التي تروج لهذا الموضوع على أنه مشروع انفصالي، لكن هو حقيقة يعني دعوة لنظام لا مركزي في سوريا. حاليا مثلا السويداء، أهل السويداء أيضا ينادون بإدارة ذاتية، يطالبون بإدارة ذاتية. عدة مرات مثلا المظاهرات التي قامت في السويداء طالبت بإدارة مدنية، إدارة ذاتية في السويداء. أيضا هناك بعض المدن الأخرى، يعني المناطق الأخرى مثل درعا، مثل إدلب. حتى لو نسأل العلويين أو مناطق الساحل في الفترة الحالية، هم أيضا سيقولون لو يكون لنا إدارة ذاتية سيكون وضعنا بوضع أفضل. بالتالي يعني موضوع الإدارة الذاتية لا نريدها أن يبقى ضمن إطار إقليم واحد، يعني في مناطق شمال وشرق سوريا فقط، إنما نسعى لأن يتم تعميمه على سوريا، بحيث يعني يكون هناك نظام لا مركزي في سوريا. فضمن هذا الإطار هذا هو مطلبنا الأساسي ضمن سوريا، بأن تكون لا مركزية تعددية ديمقراطية.
So we look for autonomous region, and the Turkish government and the many media, they promote the fact that we are looking for independent, but no, we call for a decentralized solution for all of Syria. Currently nowadays in Sueda region south of Syria, they are calling for a autonomous region. Also, there are many areas in Syria like Dar'a in the south next to Sueda, Idlib in the north. Even if you go and ask the Alawite community in the Syrian coast, they also think that the decentralized solution, the federal system, is much better for them. I mean, so the autonomous administration that we seek for is not only for our region. We seek that this should be the model for all of Syria, where Syria would be governed in a democratic, decentralized system.
Thank you very much indeed, Elham. I'm just going to end with a comment from Paul Namfi, who, as I said, was obviously knew the late Meredith Tax, who's a great activist, and he says, Biji Rojava, Biji Kobane. So thank you very much, Elham. I don't need to translate that. We're going to move to our second panel. Elham, thank you again. Hope to see you in Washington soon. And we now have two panelists who are going to talk about Rojava, which is Iranian Kurdistan. Our two panelists are Soma Rostami, who is the director of the English department at the Hengao Organization for Human Rights. And what they do is a lot of research on what's happening in Iranian Kurdistan in Rojava. And if you follow their website and their Twitter feed, you'll see they've done a fantastic documentation on the abuses of the Iranian regime against Iranian Kurds. We're also joined by Dr. Aso Hassanzadeh. He is a Kurdish academic specialist in international law. He's also been a fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Each of our speakers will start with a short presentation, and then we will have questions and answers. So if our technical team, which is definitely not me, could shift and let Ms. Rostami first. And let me just say, before we start this part of the program, my apologies to Chad Brand and Miles Caggins. I wasn't able to ask your questions, but if you're still here, you get to ask first in the next part. Ms. Rostami, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Sorry, do you have my voice?
That's great. Make it as loud as possible. Yeah. Put your volume up full blast, and people will turn it down if it's too much. But I'm a bit deaf, so this is perfect for me.
Is it better now?
That's fantastic. Please go ahead.
Good. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Go ahead. Please introduce yourself and give us your presentation. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to correct you. I'm not the director of English department. I'm just a member of Hangout. But thank you. I actually want to have a short start. I want to go back to 43 years ago and start with the conflict between the Kurds and the Islamic Republic, since it started ruling actually. When it held a referendum in 1973, and which was approved by 98% of the people, the Kurds was the largest group who objected to the choice and boycotted the referendum. The killing of Kurds started then with a large number of arresting and executing of Kurdish people. Now, in fact, after 43 years, Zhina's revolution gave them, the people, another chance to express their opposition to the government, besides many other activities they have done so far during the past years to show their opposition during the past years they have done so far, and this caused severe attacks. We see it during the past 3 months happened to the people, especially to the Kurdish people. And severe attacks on defenseless and empty-handed people in the worst ways, while they are only asking for justice and their legitimate rights peacefully. The suppression in Kurdistan was very severe. So Hangal organization used the word genocide a few times for what happened in Juanro or Javan and Mahabad also. The cities of Sna or Sanandaj, Bukan, Mahabad, Juanro, Sakaz were under siege for days. Even Juanro didn't have access to medical and treatment services and food for some time. This is clear that the government forces directly kill and shoot people in all cities of Iran, but in Kurdish cities, they started shooting people with bullets, war weapons in the first days since the beginning of the protest in Balochistan too. Should I continue or?
Yeah, if you've more, is there? Yeah, please. A little bit more would be great, and then we'll go to Mr. Zadeh. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Since the first days, Hangal team started searching to get accurate and valid information and statistics about women, children, and abducted or arrested citizens. The fate of some of them is still unknown for us, but absolutely we see the arrested citizens mostly get the most severe sentence, which is death or execution for Muharaba or fighting against God. We had also some reports showed transferring foreign forces from Iraq to Kurdish cities like Elham and Kermashan to suppress the protesters and protests in Kurdistan.
We can still hear you.
I'm still here, sorry.
No, we can still hear you. Have you finished, or do you want to?
Thank you. I thought I'm disconnected. There was some other reports showing that Joanro was attacked by a chemical gas known as net gas in green or yellow colors. It is still in an area of ambiguity because our team couldn't have access to reliable document or the gas shells to verify it. After firing the gas, the forces actually blocked the street and collected the shells, but based on the poisoning signs of the protesters, we guess this was a type of illegal gas and wasn't actually tear gas. And we have also a video that shows and proves using of the gas. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And now we're going to turn to Professor Asor Hassanzadeh. Thank you very much, Professor Zadeh. I know you've worked in Washington before. You know this policy area very well. Looking forward to your talk. Go ahead. Thank you.
Rojbash, bonjour. Hello. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear. Go ahead.
Do you have my voice?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. So first of all, I would like to thank the Kurdish Institute in Paris and in Washington for organizing this timely seminar. I know that this is not their first event with regard to the situation in Iranian Kurdistan, but well, we still need much more events like this. You know, from time to time, the center of gravity of the Kurdish question moves from one part of Kurdistan to another part. At this point, this center of gravity is, or it should be, the Iranian Kurdistan. But still, this part of Kurdistan, even under the current circumstances, suffers from lack of political support and media attention, or the support and the attention that it receives, it does not reflect actually the role played on the ground by our Kurdish people in Iran, or the repression is facing these days. What I would like to emphasize in these preliminary remarks is two main points. First, from the point of view of the whole movement, the general movement in Iran, because even if our priority is Kurdistan, we all agree that the Kurdish people in Iran cannot overthrow the regime alone, and we have to coordinate with the rest of the movement in Iran. 3 months after the beginning of the unprecedented wave of protests and uprising inside Iran, the situation has, as you know, all the features of a revolutionary process. Obviously, the regime may still resort to much more repression and violence. And the movement may know its up and down, may have ups and downs, but fortunately, some features that were absent in the previous waves of protests are present this time. For example, the continuity of the movement in time and space is very broad popular base, which overcomes all the ethnic, gender, political barriers. The general and very radical nature of the demands. It's no longer about sectoral demands that could be made with some reforms, but about fundamental, all-encompassing demands that can be made only with a regime change. The momentum of unity among Iranian peoples, the fact that people are no longer afraid from the regime. And I should also mention, of course, the unprecedented international solidarity. But actually, this novelty of the features, the international solidarity, maybe I will explain it later during the discussion, but suffers from a series of deficiencies, actually. All that said, there is a huge flaw that subsists, which is the leadership. While we have local leaders on the ground, the movement suffers from a lack of leadership on the national scale, which is, well, it's a good thing in the sense that it makes the movement less vulnerable and also prevents the emergence of leaders that could later hijack the outcome of the revolution, as did Khomeini in 1979. But still, in order to gather all the pro-change forces in Iran and lead them towards an outcome, a common outcome that could be acceptable for all, we absolutely need a minimum of a common framework of action. And sorry, I have no electricity anymore. Can you continue with Soma? I will ask what's happening here.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear it.
Yeah.
We can still hear you. You just don't have any lights. Your computer battery's still working.
No lights. I don't know what's happening in the building. You can continue. Just I'll be back.
Okay. All right. Tell us when you're back, and what I'll do is I'll throw the floor open to some questions. You're back. Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. So Renas, can you just hold on for a second, please? You'll get the first question. And Professor Zadeh, please carry on. Thank you.
Okay. Apologies. Yeah, this is as for the movement, the Iranian perspective. Now for the Kurdish perspective, obviously all has started from Kurdistan, and the Kurds in Iran are the vanguard of the whole movement, not only because Zhina was a Kurdish girl, but because since day one, Iranian Kurds never accepted this regime, and they never stopped fighting against this regime. And their political and civil consciousness, their human values, and above all, their courage and ability to react against the oppression inspired all Iranians. And that probably explains why the repression in Iranian Kurdistan is much tougher than any other part of Iran, with the regime using live ammunition and combat weapons against demonstrators, and putting our cities under heavy military siege. By doing so, the regime believes that it may crush the movement in its birthplace. And this horrific attempt of the regime is not confined, as you know, to inside Iranian Kurdistan, because given the fact that the cooperation center of the Iranian Kurdish political parties played a very significant role in this movement, and its calls for mobilization and general strikes were systematically received favorably by the population. Over the course of the 3 months, the Iranian regime carried out a campaign of missile and drone strikes on their bases in Iraqi Kurdistan, and even the Iranian regime considers the possibility of conducting ground military operations inside Iraqi Kurdistan. And the purpose is the purpose of the Islamic Republic in doing this, by doing so, is to, of course, divert once again the attention of the public opinion from what's happening inside Iran, and to try to divide the Iranian peoples by constantly referring to the so-called danger of dismemberment of Iran. But what about our Kurdish political parties in the face of these Iranian political and military maneuvers. Our parties kept giving the priority to the continuation of the movement, the popular movement inside Iran, and the preservation of unity among Iranians. They did not retaliate by sending Peshmerga forces inside Iran, and their political discourse remained focused on maintaining and safeguarding the unity of Iranians. For example, the very term of Rosh Halat that you have used in the announce of this webinar, which is a very good thing, and I approve, we do approve, has practically disappeared from our Iranian Kurdish political discourse over the course of the past months. Actually, the potential of action and the motivations of the Iranian Kurds differ a lot from that of people, for example, in Tehran, or let's say less marginalized groups in Iran. For example, the Center of Cooperation of our Kurdish political parties had also to recommend our Iranian Kurdish demonstrators to coordinate their action with what is happening, what is being conducted by other parts of Iran. So with all this, unfortunately, while the understanding, the solidarity shown by the Iranian people, the Iranians as a whole towards Kurdish existence, Kurdish demands in Iran, it has improved, but well, the vision of most of the Iranian opposition political groups is very far from what we are hoping and imagining for the future of Iran. And while Iranian Kurds play a very significant role on the ground, I'm not sure if at the larger picture, at the larger political picture in Iran, especially from the perspective of the Iranian opposition, our political visibility is as it should be. And in short, as a conclusion, I would say as Iranian Kurds, we are advancing in two fronts simultaneously. On one side, we have to help the formation of a greater and meaningful unity among Iranians in order to bring about regime change and the advent of a democratic, pluralist, and if possible, federal system in Iran. On the other side, and at the same time, we have to hold an identity-based political discourse which could reflect properly the specific needs and demands of our Kurdish people in Iran. Well, I'll stop here and look forward to getting the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming back. I'm sorry you were interrupted there. We were going to have a question from Renas Sino, but Renas has apparently left us, unfortunately. But I'm going to ask some questions on behalf of Yusuf Ismail, the director of the Kurdish Institute. I'm also going to add in a question that came from Bakir Lashkari, and these two are initially for Ms. Soma Rostami, if that's okay, and then Professor Zadi, I'll ask you something afterwards. So Yusuf asks, how many protesters have been killed in the Kurdistan region, and how difficult is it to get news from Iran generally, but Roj Halat in particular? And Bakir Lashkari asks, I think, a very good question, which you as a human rights person will be interested. What does it mean for the uprising, given that Iran was today kicked off the UN Women's Rights Committee? How they're on there in the first place is another question, but that's for you, Ms. Rostami.
So actually, so far, the statistics just updated today, unfortunately, it was 124 citizens killed. And I don't know if I can share the PowerPoint. Okay, maybe
are you able to share your screen? Okay. All right, if you can't share, that's fine. And then the other part of the question, go ahead, please.
I only read the statistics, like children, there was 5 cases, 15 cases, women 7 cases, and the killed people, killed citizens under torture so far is 8 cases, unfortunately. And about the removing the Iran from the UN, which is the best choice. It's actually the beginning of the very big steps. So it's really helpful, I guess. And people are really happy for this. Iranian people, Kurdish people, that's a good news. And I think that's a good start for banning Iran's government from everything to be completely removed actually from the international community.
Thank you very much. And if I may just add a comment, which is, I think the Iranian regime's decision to side with Russia against Ukraine is kind of a form of self-sanctioning. So for those people who have been advocating for sanctions against Iran, it's good to know the Iranian regime is helping out in its own strange way. So Professor Zadeh, the question for you is, how do you evaluate the relationship between the Kurdish parties and the Iranian opposition parties? You kind of hinted at that, and I thought you made a very interesting point about how the vision that the Iranian opposition parties have for, whoops, you've lost your electricity again, but we can still see you. The vision the Iranian opposition parties have for the Kurds is often quite a bleak one. And I personally, I don't know about you, I find it very worrying when I hear Iranian Kurdish politicians tell me about the wonderful conversations they've had with the MEK, a party with the blood of thousands of Kurds on their hands. What do you think is the possibility of any kind of relationship between the Iranian opposition and the Kurds, given that, you know, if there is some kind of change in government in Iran, there will inevitably be some kind of breakdown and maybe loss of control over Kurdistan? If you're still with us, if you can answer, let me know.
I'm with you. Unfortunately, I'm not in my usual place, so I have no control over the way electricity works in this place.
Okay.
But if you hear me, if you allow me to
please speak. Go ahead.
My voice, can you very shortly repeat the question? It was about the vision of the Iranian opposition groups towards Kurds.
And their relationship with the Kurdish parties, that relationship between...
Well, yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Actually, you know, despite the propaganda from the Iranian regime, that is unfortunately repeated by some segments of the Iranian opposition, our party and most of the Kurdish political parties in Iranian Kurdistan, while considering themselves as being part of a nation, a Kurdish nation that has been divided without its consent, but we inscribe our struggle since the start in the framework of Iran. So we are struggling for a political solution to the Kurdish question in Iran within the current borders. And it does not prevent us to show solidarity towards other parts of Kurdistan and other parts. This is what we are expecting also from other parts of Kurdistan. And our parties, well, here I'm not the spokesperson of any political party, but I can tell you that our parties have been for decades trying to unite not only the Kurdish home, as we say, or to create a Kurdish United Front, the Iranian Kurdish United Front, but also to unite other forces in the Iranian opposition. One of our Secretary General, Dr. Serêkaniyê, was killed exactly while he was discussing with the representatives of other political groups from the Iranian opposition. And right now, most of our main political parties, namely Komala Party and KDPI, are members of at least two alliances or coalitions of Iranian opposition groups. And this political spectrum in the Iranian opposition is, of course, very much diverse. There are still many divisions, historic, ideological, and political divisions among themselves. But while we are seeing a sort of understanding, as I mentioned previously, towards Kurdish demands during the past 3 months, especially, but still the majority of the Iranian opposition does not accept to see the essence of the Kurdish rights, which is a struggle for self-determination, actually. We consider ourselves as a nation, as part of a nation with the right of self-determination, and this self-determination has various forms. One of them is federalism or autonomy. This is our strategy, but while discussions are ongoing, especially these days with main groups in the Iranian opposition. But so far, we do not see any tangible outcome that could tell us that there is a change, a shift in the vision, in the positive sense of the majority of the Iranian opposition groups towards our Kurdish demands. But in any case, we are continuing our efforts, and let's see. I think if the Kurdish people is more united and improves its political visibility, as I said, many things would change in the future.
Thank you very much indeed. And I have a question here from Dana Peach, who was unable to ask a question earlier, wasn't in one of those who got to ask questions. So here's her question. And she asked, basically, is the Kurdish movement a national movement? You kind of answering this, of or against revolution? I mean, and it's a great question, because let's face it, what if there is a revolution in Iran and it turns out to be a revolution of reactionaries and nationalists? Are you better with the devil you know or the devil you don't know?
Well, it's amazing to ask us if we are part of this process, of this revolutionary process, while according to reliable and verifiable information, we so far, and Soma from Hangao can confirm, we have at least 122 killed among the people who lost their lives, and everything, as I said, started from Kurdistan, and the Kurdish people are the vanguard of this movement for the whole Iran. So yes, we are part of the revolution, but yes, we are also nationalist, moderate nationalist in the positive sense. I do not see any contradiction between being nationalist in the sense that we define ourselves and the fact of being a revolutionary in the sense of trying to overthrow this reactionary and despotic regime of the Islamic Republic, where I don't think that the fact of continuing the replacing a theocracy in Iran with an ethnocracy, or continuing with ethnocracy, would equate to democracy.
Thank you very much. I have a question here, interesting question from Sarah Glynn, which is about strikes. Strikes were obviously critical to bring down the Shah. Famous oil strike was part of it. So for Ms. Rostami, obviously there's a strike movement, but what can one really say about, is there a meaningful labor movement in Iran today, given that, you know, the Islamic Republic is very much a bourgeois state and has tried very hard to prevent labor organizing? I mean, is there meaningful trade union movement, would you say, in Rojava?
About the strikes?
Yeah, and how meaningful the labor movement in Rojava is, please.
Yeah, of course. The strikes started in Kurdistan from the beginning of the very beginning of the protests and very first days of the movement, and it's still going on in Kurdistan. We see all the streets are closed, will be closed whenever they call people, actually. But about the labor movement, yes, they are joining the strikes, and it's good news, because we see in the largest cities, they are not really supporting the strikes they are doing, but it's not enough, actually. So the labor movement, like the trucks and like the labor ones, really helpful to actually make the government weaker. And that's a good point, because they shouldn't be supported financially from inside Iran and also outside Iran. So it will be really helpful, and that's a good one. That's a good start for the movement to join the strikes.
Great, thank you very much. And I suppose the next question is really this. I mean, you know, just to relate it to the previous discussion on Rojava, you know, we often hear that Kurds are good allies of the West, and Kurds want Western countries to take up their cause and all that. But the obstacle consistently is, you know, the relations with Turkey. And that's the consistent roadblock. And obviously, you know, different parts of the Kurdish movement in different countries have tried, and sometimes to a degree and sometimes not at all, to come to some kind of accommodation in Turkey. Do you have any sense, Professor Zadeh, from your perspective, international sort of relations and law, of what Turkey's view on what's happening in Iran is, and certainly its view towards the fact that Kurds have been a leading element in the unrest in Iran? Do you have a sense of that? And do you have any indication of whether the Kurdish parties are trying to communicate with the Turkish government to maybe reassure the Turkish government on these matters?
Well, to my knowledge, there is no relations between Iranian Kurdish political parties and the Turkish government. We used to say, and it's still true, that the only government that we are struggling against is the Iranian regime, but at the same time you are not indifferent towards other governments in the neighboring countries are doing to the Kurdish people, and we are for the peaceful resolution of the Kurdish question in those countries. As for the Iranian-Turkish relations, you know, all this, as Madame Elham Ahmad said, these countries, Iran and Turkey, well, they have been coordinating for decades around the Kurdish question. All of them are actually against the establishment of any Kurdish entity in any part of Kurdistan, including Rojava and Rojava. But at the same time, while we have been seeing many instances of examples of cooperation, coordination in security and political matters between Turkey and Iran, they have strategic differences also. As for example, the existence of Turkish-speaking group in Iran, and what's happening in between Armenia and Azerbaijan and what's happening precisely in Syria. But a point was interesting in what was being said by Madam Ahmed, and if you allow me, if I may, I would like to comment on this, is that while, as she said, the Turkish government is trying to take advantage of the fact that the international community or Western countries are busy with the Ukrainian crisis in order to attack Rojava. Actually, it's the contrary in the case of Iran, because while those Western countries are busy mainly with the Ukrainian war, Iran is part of this war because, as you know, of its involvement in supplying Russia with its drones and for many other reasons. But it's sad to see we are suffering from the same kind of shortcoming in the dealings of international community in Rojava as in Rojava, in the sense that while we are witnessing condemnations, some measures are taken. Of course, these words have translated into some deeds, some actions, but it's not enough, and we absolutely need much more international, effective international measures in order to pressure the Iranian regime.
Thank you very much. We're almost at time. I've been asked how people can help. That's a very good practical question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give to everybody now the website for the Hengao Organization for Human Rights, where Ms. Soma Rostami is one of those involved and does excellent work. And the website is hengao.net, HENGAW_NET, and you can contact them through their website. I think in terms of practicality, I'm not quite sure how we can help, given that, of course, Iran is under sanctions still to a degree. And so, you know, things like sending money are not an available option. But I think one of the most important things anybody can do, and it's one of the goals of the Washington Kurdish Institute and the Institut de Paris, is to just, you know, raise awareness about what's happening in Kurdistan, whether it's in Rojava or Rojava or Bashur or Bakur, whichever part of Kurdistan you have a connection to or you're involved with. And if you're living in a country like I am, which is a democracy, and you have an elected representative, you can write to that elected representative and you can raise the issue. And the other thing you can do, if you're in the Kurdish diaspora, and you're living in a democracy, well, you can run for office. We actually have 2 Kurds elected to the British Parliament at the moment. One is a Conservative, one is Labour. We have Kurds, I believe, in the Bundestag, Kurds in the Swedish Parliament. You know, get involved. This is a very good way to help. I want to end by saying thank you to Professor Zadeh and for his persistence in the face of some utility challenges. Thank you very much to Ms. Soma Rostami. Thank you for your excellent work on human rights and monitoring that situation and documenting what's happening. Thank you to the Institut de Paris, and thank you to the Washington Kurdish Institute, and particularly for Yusuf and Milas for all their fantastic work in bringing this meeting together. And hopefully we'll be back with you again, whether in person or virtually. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the both institutes. Thank you for the event.
Thank you.